Welcome back to another episode of Accept, Then Achieve. We have our honored guest today, Rosie Yeung, here with us today. Rosie, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, Tony. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. This is exciting for me. Yeah, how should I introduce myself? So my name is Rosie Yeung. In Chinese, my name is Yeung Xing'a. And that's actually only recent that I've even started saying that in an English context because I never really felt like sharing my Chinese name before, which I'm sure we can get into if we wanted to. Let's see what's relevant about me. I'm an only child. I am officially an immigrant from Hong Kong to Canada. I came when I was a baby. And so I have a Canadian accent and I grew up here. And I was a model minority, like did all the right things, went into corporate for like 20 plus years in my career and a whole story around it. But over the last 3, 4 years since COVID, have branched out to being on my own after I got laid off from my last full-time job. And I'm now self-employed or, running my own business. But for me, it's not about a business. It's really my calling, my purpose, and my service, which is to be a trauma-informed, unexecutive coach, particularly for Asian and racialized women.
I love that. Oh, so inspiring what you're doing. Can you explain more what unexecutive coaching is?
Yes, I mean, part of the unending business self-employment stuff is all the marketing that I never wanted to do. In corporate, I was a CPA, a chartered professional accountant, as well as a certified human resources leader. So not business sales marketing at all. So that's something new for me. But to explain what unexecutive is, I just wrote on my website that I never wanted to be a coach. So there's a million things I've been doing for the last 3, 4 years that I'm like never wanted to do, never thought I would do, never thought I'd be on a podcast or hosting a podcast, which I did. And part of why I am unexecutive as a coach is because I saw what corporate coaching looked like, particularly from my HR perspective.
Hmm.
In HR, we would assign coaches to people typically because there was something missing or something wrong. Like it always felt like a corrective measure. And the coaching always seemed to be for the purpose of making the person, the coachee, more corporate, more executive. And executive over the last 20 plus years has always looked like white men in suits or sometimes white women in suits. And it's not about the race in particular. I always need to caveat this for a wide audience where I'm not against white people. I am not saying that all white people are the same, not at all. What I do think is the systems of inequity, including corporate systems of inequity that have been perpetuated, um, end up making everyone look the same. It's also about conformity. And so that conforms to a certain thing that was known to be executive presence, and that executive presence ended up looking like your typical three-piece suit, white, strong, assertive male, and doing all those things. So when I came to coaching, it was not directly to coaching. It was through my own, I guess, my own mental illness, first of all, and trying to heal from that, tying that in with trauma, life trauma, and workplace trauma. Being laid off was part of that workplace trauma. Being bullied at work was part of that workplace trauma. And then as I became certified as a trauma recovery coach, I realized that there was a lot of intersections and merging that I wanted to do between trauma recovery coaching and corporate coaching. I know the space. My heart is for employees. It's about me being HR on their side, an advocate for employees and giving them more power and knowledge. And it's to help them through coaching to be whatever it is that they want without having to conform, without having to match the executive presence, look, feel, sound, maybe not even wearing a suit, right? So whatever that looks like for them, it's for me, it's the antithesis. It doesn't mean doing the opposite of what executive leadership looks like. There's a lot of good things about executive leadership, but it's
Mhm.
more opening the doors so it's not all the same.
I love that. Yeah, because I've seen so many executive coaches, but you're the first and only unexecutive coach that I know
Yay.
of. And I think that's amazing. Yeah, because we don't have to conform to this one way of leadership. I think that's so great what you're doing. So I guess that segues into our podcast theme and everything. Like, what does acceptance and achievement, or accept then achieve, mean to you, and what inspired you to want to speak on this podcast?
Ah, that whole accept then achieve, that really hits home, Tony. Like everything actually about your profile, and I met you through LinkedIn. It's having some commonality too, right? As Asian diaspora women, it's I never felt accepted pretty much my whole life. And yes, that is very personal. Something I've learned through trauma coaching is to separate fact from feeling, but also that feelings are valid
Hmm.
and the impact on us is valid, right? So, I guess what accept then achieve means to me is, at least in my family, and I think in many Chinese cultures or Asian cultures, acceptance is only through achievement. Like you
Hmm.
achieve to gain acceptance.
Yeah.
I don't want to blanket statement that, but it was definitely true in my family, and not in a tiger mom kind of way that whoever wrote that book or that article made it sound like. I believe my parents genuinely love me, and they want to accept me, or they think they accept me.
Hmm.
I'm in my 40s now, so it took me this long to come to that point to even be able to say that, right? But for most of my life, I never felt that, or it was hard to receive it in the way that they demonstrated it, right? Like the atypical Chinese mother love of, here, eat some more oranges. I peeled them for you, right? Or I made you soup. When are you coming to pick up the soup that I made for you? Um, I know a lot of love is shown through service,
Hmm.
but what I also want to highlight, because I couldn't reconcile these things for myself, is that that as a family norm, or as sometimes culturally a culturally norm, I've heard it kind of presented as an excuse almost, like, well, that's just how Chinese moms are. Or you have to accept love that way because that is culturally how it's shown. And I'm not saying that it's, Western culture one way or Eastern culture another way. It's just I needed more than that. And by learning about how our brains work and trauma and how commonality among all human beings, we need to know that we need to know in our hearts that we're accepted. It was
Hmm.
like, okay, it's not dependent on culture at all. If we don't feel as an individual that we have unconditional love from our family members, our caregivers, and even at work, right? Just because it's at work doesn't mean socially we don't still need acceptance. We do.
Hmm.
Um, if we don't have that, then we end up compensating for it in ways that can be very ineffective. So, my perfectionism, my overachievement, and the ways I also forced that on team members who reported to me. I always thought I was doing it for the greater good. Like, of course, we want to produce high quality work. I'm just doing what my bosses tell me to do. Well,
Hmm.
we're just trying to satisfy the client, right? So, there's all these good reasons, but
Hmm.
it was really ultimately me trying to win acceptance and through that win love, even in a work context.
Hmm.
So yeah, so just seeing that, I believe now that what I need and what I think many people need is liberation, liberation from achievement, and liberation more so from what achievement means to them, like why they're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. So
I'll
well
stop there.
said. Yes, that's my exact mission too. It's just how much heartache, how much, oh my gosh, that it would have saved us
Mhm.
if we had just had that. It's a basic human need, this unconditional love, unconditional positive regard, at least somebody seeing you as the treasure that you are. And a lot of people get that from their families early on or throughout their entire lives, that really creates that secure base and allows them to be that for themselves too. But for those of us who haven't, we are taught to be equal, just as hard or even harder on ourselves, and not accepting of
Yes.
ourselves, and always chasing something. And then even when we accomplish amazing things, these achievements, and we still feel empty, still feel like it's not enough, and it's never
Yes.
enough, and we chase and chase until we die. And
Yes.
so I'm really
Yes.
just trying to break that pattern here, because so many people, it's causing so much suffering out there, so much trauma, just it's self-inflicted too later on. It's just, and we
Mhm.
pass it on too. As you mentioned, you pass it on to the people you worked with too.
Mhm.
I know I have as well.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I'm just so
Mhm.
honored, and you have so much wisdom and experiences to share with us today. So, yeah, I don't even know where to start, but could you just tell us more on how that journey was to your own self-acceptance, or do you feel like you're still working on that now, and maybe how your relationship with your family has evolved over
Mhm.
time as well?
Yes, I'm trying to think where to start with it too. Well, so first of all, I just want to say I really uh, feel grateful and honored that you said such encouraging things to me coming from a doctor. Because like I said, I'm a former accountant and HR executive. So a lot of what my understanding around why I need acceptance so badly or why human beings need it so badly comes from my newly gained knowledge about neurobiology and psychology and things I wish like, oh, if I'd known science was like this in school, I would have taken more courses. Right? But it was like, I'm tired of dissecting rats. Like maybe can I do accounting instead? Big mistake. um, I guess, so here's something I've been thinking about a lot because in my work, in my coaching work, I focus on non-obvious trauma
Mhm.
or covert trauma. I think non-obvious is a little bit less triggering than the word covert. And why I say non-obvious and the relevance of it, I guess, is that I didn't know myself. Like I have been diagnosed with depression and anxiety, that so mental illnesses or things that are not mentally healthy. And I
Mhm.
see trauma as the new mental health in that even in medical community, it is relatively new, the understanding about the breadth and the depth of trauma,
Mhm.
types of trauma, how it shows up, what it is, what the impacts are. And one of the doctors and researchers on this that I highly respect and recommend that people read from is Dr. Gabor Mate. He is a Hungarian Canadian doctor who is a survivor, a direct survivor of the Holocaust. He was a baby then, and his research on trauma shows that trauma isn't what happens to you, it's what happens inside you.
Mhm.
That's one thing. And the second big thing is that trauma isn't just bad things happening, it's the good things that should have happened but didn't.
Absolutely.
And those two things were so profound for me in reevaluating like my whole life and understanding that like even the theme of this podcast, right? If we don't have acceptance, acceptance is a fundamental human need. Like we are socially wired to need acceptance, to want to be accepted. If we don't have that for whatever reason, from our early caregivers, from our social networks, then that can be traumatic for us. Whether it is or not is individual, right? Depends on a whole
Mhm.
bunch of factors, including environmental. But that can be a very traumatizing thing. Like to imagine a baby or a child feeling not physically abused necessarily, but never emotionally cared for, never held, never feeling safe, like never knowing if that parent or caregiver is going to be nice to them or show love to them that day or not.
Mhm.
That leads to conditions like complex PTSD, which is again something that's a newer understanding of it, right? So the impacts of these, again, I call them non-obvious because there's no physical marks.
Mhm.
It's not something that we're trained to look for, like school teachers are trained to look for physical abuse, or in the workplace, we're just starting to understand impacts of domestic violence, etc. And yet, things like that can affect. I'll use me as an example. Perfectionism is one thing, but even let's say procrastination, right? It
Mhm.
seems innocuous. It's been treated or dealt with in a corporate context through like time management courses or productivity courses, and I feel like I've done them all and read all the books, but
Yes.
it doesn't get to the fundamental why underneath. Why am I putting things off? Why can't I seem to manage all the things on my to-do list? Why am I not able to do the things I've scheduled in my calendar at the time that I've scheduled them? What's really behind that? Some of it is just overload, sure. It doesn't always have to be about trauma. But I know that the theme through my whole life underneath it is, what if I fail? What if I look stupid?
Mhm.
What if I don't know what I'm doing and I don't have anyone to ask, which has been like my whole entrepreneurship journey? What are people going to think of me? How will I ever get clients? How will I ever make friends at work? How will I ever get the performance rating? And if I don't get those things, what will my parents think of me? I don't even know that these are the thoughts that are happening or the feelings that are happening. But that is what it is, right? So I can't remember what your original question was, Tony. But I think that's, yeah, like just going on that. Oh, and then the shame. Sorry. So
Yes.
that, I think that's what I was trying to get to answer your original question, which I still can't remember. And it's just that feeling of, oh, what does it ultimately mean? The fear of failure, the fear of not having friends at work. It's just this deep social outcast sense, the shame of, oh, I'm stupid. Oh, I'll never be any good at this.
Mhm.
Imposter syndrome. It's what's behind that really is the shame. It's like, well, they list 20 things on a job description. I only meet 19 of them. Therefore, I could never do that job. It's
Mhm.
not, it is systemic inequity, yes. And it is whatever we individually bring that leads us to think one
Mhm.
missing thing out of 20 is too much.
Yeah. It's that fear too. It's the shame of being not good enough, but ultimately not being likable or lovable or just not belonging anywhere and being left all
Mm.
alone. And that means death to our primitive, our subconscious system because we as tribal creatures, yes, we did die when we were different, when we had no one by our side or on our side. And so, at least for me, I'm just speaking personally, yeah, that was my biggest fear too for a very long time. And even now, just that sense of safety to really put ourselves out there, to follow through on this great idea that we have. I've been procrastinating on writing my book forever, though I had the idea for years now, but it's just, yeah, working through and getting to that really deep rooted cause, which is it traces back. It's from all of our lived experience. So don't worry about the original question. The original question was just like, just share about your journey. So it's very open ended, and we can
Okay, good.
wherever
Phew.
this
Because I
naturally
would be
goes.
ashamed of it seems like, oh, I'm so embarrassed, right? Like it's
Don't be
interesting how
embarrassed.
quickly it comes up.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it comes up
Yeah.
everywhere. Oh, you're doing great, though. Thank you. Just everything you said, I
Thank
feel
you.
like everyone can relate for sure on that. So, what was most helpful for you then in really breaking through to that? It's like awareness is good, but awareness itself is not enough, I think. So, what has really helped in the next steps after that?
You're totally right. Gosh, because I'm a pretty cerebral person, as in I learn best through um, lectures, reading, teaching, seeing things happen. The awareness was a big thing for me because through that I could already make a lot of connections. I think one of my skill sets that's hard to translate onto a resume is being able to connect a lot of dots.
Mhm.
So just from reading and learning about trauma, which is how I even got to wanting to become a trauma recovery coach, I could already recognize things in my life experience where it's like, oh, that explains it. Oh, you mean
Mhm.
I'm not that screwed up. Like where it's not that I'm abnormal. It's not that there's something freakishly wrong with me. Or in the something you said earlier that I wanted to go back to, the why did I put off writing a book, right? Why did I not do this thing for so long? With that comes a lot of social and capitalist labels like, well, it's because you're lazy. Oh, you're not disciplined enough. Oh, you're not working hard enough. Right? Like all these things that are like, that's right. That's my problem. And learning about it, getting the awareness is like, oh, that might be part of the problem. I'm not saying it isn't, but I'm just talking about me, not you. But so part of my problem might be like, yeah, inherently I would rather watch TV than do some work. But I'm not a lazy person, and I know this because of how hard I've been working my whole freaking life. It's other stuff. So it's a release from shame. Actually, it's learning compassion in whatever way that we can get compassion. And compassion is a huge thing because compassion is actually the most powerful counter to shame.
Mhm.
That's part of the principles about trauma recovery. Because shame and fear are two of the default, like it automatically comes from with anyone who has experienced trauma. We're afraid to talk about it, we're afraid to admit it, and we're deeply ashamed because we think there's something wrong with us because of
Mhm.
the trauma we experienced. Like we deserved it, whatever that trauma was, including not being socially accepted, including not being loved. Like we deserved it, right? It must be there's something unlovable about me. That's why I wasn't loved by whoever. And so unwinding that narrative through whether it's just reading about it, like understanding, listening to your podcast, right? Like I was like, oh, that's what acceptance, like that's why acceptance is important. But then finding ways in our lives to apply that or to see how it's missing. And maybe a helpful exercise for anyone who's listening right now to kind of think back on, what were times in your life where you felt really accepted? Like just, or think of one scenario, maybe it was at a birthday party, right? And you're like with your close friends and everybody was having a great time and you felt really comfortable with each other, like you'd be best friends forever. Or maybe it was on a family trip. And everyone was just like, oh, experiencing this new place together and building a beautiful memory. Could be getting married, right? It could be being with a partner. So thinking about that and recognizing the feelings that you had, the sensations physically, like what did that do for you? What does it feel? What does it mean to you to have that kind of acceptance? And then contrast that with a time in your life when you didn't have that acceptance. Sadly, I think I can think of a lot more of those times than times when I felt accepted.
Mhm.
For me, it's being a Chinese Canadian woman. As a kid growing up 40 years ago, wasn't a lot of people like me. And so I definitely experienced some racism as a kid that I didn't even know the name was wrong. Like I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know that there was anything anyone could do about it. Right. It was just like,
Mhm.
well, as a Chinese kid, this is what you have to do, that you have to go through. That's just how life is. So even like recognizing something as seemingly small as that, like today in 2023, we can be like, oh, that was terrible. You shouldn't have gone through that. But that's the insidiousness of non-obvious trauma,
Mhm.
as well as like the shame that comes with it. I didn't even know I was ashamed of being Chinese, but I was. I didn't want to speak the language. I didn't want to like the food or bring the food to school. I was ashamed of my parents, funny accents when they spoke English, little things like that. That's like, oh, I didn't realize what that stuff was tied to. So by unlearning those narratives, we can start finding the true acceptance. Okay, this is my identity. Like who I am is actually a very joyful person. To take a non race related example,
Mhm.
maybe you were really exuberant as a kid, but your parents or your family always told you to like, quiet down, especially if you're a girl, right? Like sit nicely, behave
Mhm.
yourself, don't be so rambunctious.
Mhm.
Nice girls don't, nice girls do. And yet naturally who you are, it's not that you're not a nice girl, it's just that you're full of energy and lots of creativity and joy and Tony, you're a cartoonist, right? Like maybe that would have been like, how are you going to make money at that? But this is
Mhm.
an expression of who you are and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. So kind of just loving the things about you that are innate to who you are, but may not have been so generally accepted at a point in your life or by others around you is a starting point to kind of get to the, oh, no, this is okay about me, and I even like this part of me. Yeah, that would be a goal.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. I think part of it too is just I feel I've been in my journey too, and I feel like I learned so much. I read, I'm cerebral too. And then
Mm,
it actually was such a different experience that I can't put into words to just meet the first friend who's just like just unconditional love, to feel
yeah.
that. I can't even explain that. And I think it can be so hard to just even explain how healing that is. And so I just hope that people can find someone in their life, even if it's just a therapist, like if you have to hire so or a therapist
Yes.
or coach or whoever, just someone who can actually be that person for you just for a moment, so you can just truly feel what it feels like to be accepted. Because I feel like in the moments that, like, at least in my memories, if I'm thinking about a really good time or maybe a time with my family, it would still be like, oh, in that moment they weren't focused on my achievements or my milestones or where things were at. It felt like a temporary acceptance for that memory, but
Mm,
it's not just a general globalized like whole
yes.
acceptance feeling. So I guess uh, I'll just throw in there that yeah, that feeling is definitely
Yes.
so healing, but it's like how do you
Yes.
specifically seek that out, or finding a support group or just finding other people who get it, who have also
Yeah.
been through. those. I think when you said non-obvious trauma, it made me think of, yeah, the word invisible scars that we have, or like death by a thousand paper cuts. You really can't, you can barely see them. They are invisible,
Yes.
but when you have so many of them, or the little t traumas,
Yes.
they
Yes.
impact you so much than just like one giant slice, like one giant
Yes.
isolated event that you can go
Yes.
back and you can process, you can learn to heal from. But if you just grew up all of your childhood, most of your adulthood for so many years,
Yes.
just every day being cut down a little bit more, that is,
Yes.
oh, so
Yes.
awful. It's,
Yes. And I'm really glad that you named some kind of community, right? Whether it's one person, a therapist, a coach, or because frankly, none of us are taught this, right? So I'm not surprised that my parents and my friends didn't learn how to unconditionally accept themselves, let alone unconditionally accept me.
mhm,
Speaking of unconditional love and acceptance, my cat, get up here. I I got a cat partly because I always wanted a cat and I never got one. My parents didn't want to have cats, so that's its whole other thing too. But like, what happens? What do our parents bring with them that prevents the children from experiencing certain things? I'm not blaming my parents. I'm just stating that this is an interesting thing I see now through trauma informed eyes, right? So I'm thankful I have this cat, which is who's also teaching me that it's okay to ask for what you want. Like my cat has been, I don't know if it's recorded on the podcast, but has been meowing nonstop since we've been on here, Tony, because I'm not giving him any attention. And he's not afraid to be like, meow, I want your attention right now. I don't care what you're doing, or I'm hungry and I want to play. And there's a book on mental health lessons I'm learning from my cat that I need to share at some point because I look at him, I'm like, yeah, what if I was unashamed and unafraid to be like, Tony, I really need a listening ear right now. I really, can you just listen to me and not, don't judge me for, I just need an unjudgmental ear because I want to tell you this thing that happened, right? Or I need a big hug. Whatever it is that gets us to feel loved and cared for, is self-care is great, but it can't all be self-care. We do need care from other people.
mhm,
And if it's not, I mean, for me, I sadly went through not having that from immediate family, not having that from immediate friends. Again, not blaming anyone, just stating facts and understanding that we all have our own capacity limits. We all are limited in our own ways, right? So I needed that from somewhere else. I found that through therapy to a certain extent, yes, and also through even my classmates in my trauma coaching program,
mhm,
because it was such a like we all knew we were hurting. We didn't know any specifics. We just all knew we came to the table with pain and with past trauma. And the judgment free, completely empathetic listening space that created was nothing I'd ever experienced before and was probably the most healing. Like I was there to learn and get certified, but I was also through that healing, receiving healing myself
mhm,
because it was this thing of, yeah, we get it. And I think that is also part of acceptance. We don't have to agree with each other to still understand each other, right? And be like, hey, I get that.
mhm,
I may not have the same opinion, but I get where you're coming from. I see why you would think that way. And I don't think any less of you for that.
mhm.
That's really missing, I think, in our world.
Yeah, I think that's such as what you just said, the important part that that we're still loved, that nothing that we share could ruin the relationship or just ruin, yeah, the connection or how we are, yeah, viewed.
Mhm,
Just like someone being able to look at us and hold us and just like hold us in that
mhm,
positive light, that high regard, like that it's all okay, that we humans are just messy and
mhm,
imperfect and we all have our dark parts. And that doesn't mean something's wrong with us. It just means that we're a typical human. I think
mhm, mhm,
it's, yeah, only the
mhm,
gods or like other
mhm,
that are perfect. Yeah, or maybe I don't know. I feel like narcissists or maybe sociopaths just feel like they're great all the time and that they have no flaws. But then clearly they still do have some flaws or dark parts. And I also wanted to say animals, they're the best at giving unconditional love too. So if you can't find a human to give you that, you're just like, yeah, I get a cat, get a dog. That can be so healing. Or just play with one at a shelter for a little bit and just notice how you feel afterwards.
Yes, excellent medical advice, and true. It's working for me too.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Um, so I guess in terms of what are the biggest challenges still? Like, I think I'm just with your journey, like just where are you at
Mhm.
now? Where were you before? And just yeah,
Mhm.
what's next for you? Or maybe
Mm.
looking back, what were your biggest turning points or things that
Mm.
stood out for you?
I'll start with the turning point. It was getting laid off from my last job, which sounds obvious, but I think it's a turning point now that I look back of I never want to go back to a full-time corporate job again
Hmm.
if I can help it. I mean, and it's not like all of my corporate experiences were bad. I've been very fortunate to have some great managers and bosses over the years. I've worked for some great organizations. I've had really great learning and growth experiences. So it's not that. It's that the boundaries of it of, for example, me on my own, if I have a day where I'm just gonna be blunt, I'm on my period and I'm really tired, it's not something that qualifies for a doctor's note to take like a day off, but I just need a few hours to lie on the couch and not do anything except moan and groan about how miserable I feel. I can do that now, right? As an entrepreneur and not have to make excuses or feel embarrassed and ashamed to say
Hmm.
anything. I don't have to suck it up. And I think that's actually what it is that for like 20 plus years or really my whole life, there's so many things I've had to suck up
Hmm.
and just take it. And it's like, well, this is how it is, right? You got to mask, you got to repress, you got to carry on. And I'm done with that. Like something, and not just about the layoff, but something has changed where, oh, it feels liberating to not have to hide or withhold parts of me anymore.
Hmm.
And still within reason. Like, I'm not saying I should just be like out there and be like, well, love me or leave me, right? Like, if you don't like it, Tony, you then whatever, I don't care. It's definitely not that. But it is a sense of I'm not, life's too short and my emotions are too precious. I value myself now too much to keep putting myself in positions where people are not willing to at least try to understand me or
Right.
give me a chance, right? Like to if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But finding a different agreement, like can we in whatever relationship we have, uh, at least commit to each other that we are going to try to understand and accept each other. It takes effort, right? And it's
Hmm.
not just about romantic relationships. Friendships take work too. So yeah, so that between that and then the friendships I intentionally cultivate or don't, and the work I intentionally do or don't, that's what's really changed for me. And so going forward, that is the biggest challenge is how do I make money at that? For me, making money is just about it. It is literally I need the money to live, but my life is not about the money. My life is about coaching and bringing the same liberation and healing that I think I've gotten to other women in particular who want that too.
Hmm.
Um, and just, yeah, how I need to live in the meantime, or I need to live while I'm doing that. So can I make that work? I really hope so. It is unexecutive. It is counter capitalist. And that doesn't exist right now. That's not how the system is. So it's a real, in a way, a social experiment for me to see if I can make that work.
I love that. Oh, you're doing so amazing. Thank you for sharing. Wow. Something that you said earlier that I had a question about, but now I forgot. Oh gosh. See, this is this
Yeah,
is
it's fine. This is
unfiltered,
authentic.
totally
Yes.
authentic. Yes. Oh, that's embarrassing. No. I'll just
Not
move
at
on to
all.
the next question though.
Yeah.
Is yeah, so was there anything in particular that helped you like detach from achievements specifically,
Mm.
or that helped you accept yourself more or most?
You know what? I think that I'm going to go back to Dr. Mate for a second, Gabor Mate. He wrote a book called When the Body Says No.
Mhm.
And that might be my favorite book of his that he's written, that and The Myth of Normal. Because when the body says no, just even the title alone, I quote that a lot when I'm like, my body is saying no right now. Like when we talk about burnout or stress leave or just like I'm really exhausted, that isn't just physical. Emotions, um, mental distress, even like mental happiness, like those things all affect our bodies as well. So I would say that when you're trapped in a cycle, and a lot of our coping strategies are end up being cycles, right? Like my achieving or overachieving was something where I could only feel good about myself if I achieved. It's its
Mhm.
own drug. Like I think there's
Or was
chemicals and
productive. Yes.
yeah,
Dopamine, I
right.
think.
Yeah, dopamine or endorphins or something, something that like oh yes, that gives me that hit that I need. But
Mhm.
it's so short lasting, and then I got to get back on the hamster wheel. So when my body finally is breaking down, does break down, and it does, or it is, and it repeats because I still try hard because I am desperate, trying to make a go at the business. Then it's learning to finally accept physical limitations as well as all other kinds of limitations, mental, emotional limitations, and be. I don't know if it's. You can see I'm still struggling. I'm trying to be okay with it because the fear is always there. The
Mhm.
fear of not making money, the fear of what will people think of me. But there's also this like feels like such a relief to just listen to my body and be like,
Mm.
I slept until whatever, 11 this morning. And I just physically, there was no way I could get up any earlier. And that means this many hours of work was not done. And I'm behind on this, or I'm just going to miss a meeting or whatever. And I'm not happy about any of those things. But there is actually something really, again, liberating about my body is telling me something, and there's only so long I cannot listen to it before
Mhm.
something worse will happen. Right.
So true.
So I think it is to a certain extent, we all need some kind of external force to show us that what we thought we could do, because that the lure, the temptation to be strong and resilient is
Mhm.
really high, and it's very well rewarded, right? Like if you can't produce, at least be strong and resilient, right? You
Mhm.
tried so hard, your effort was there. But so what? Like, and who are you efforting for, or what are you efforting for?
Mhm.
That was the other thing I realized is like, is anyone even gonna I could try my damnedest and it still wouldn't be good enough for some people. So that wasn't actually, now I think about it, there are relationships I've lost, including over the last few years as I've changed and morphed into whoever I think I always was. That made me see like, oh, you know what? There's not a thing I could do that would please them anyway. Like or the cost to me would be so high to try to maintain or retain certain relationships.
Mhm.
And it's that like, oh, there's actually no pleasing them. It's kind of like giving up, but in a positive way,
Yeah.
where like when you realize this thing that the ball that you've been chasing, you'll never reach it. Oh, well then I'm just gonna stop trying. And I'm gonna go do something else that is achievable. Right? Like
Mhm.
a good kind of achieve instead
Mhm.
of the impossible achieve.
Yeah. Or you just realize like this is not fair for someone to, yeah, like hold that ball and possibly high there, or have
Yeah.
that, yeah, those expectations of a friendship or anything like that. If
Yeah.
they, yeah, that's not like, I don't know, balanced or reciprocal or
Yes.
equal if it's always like
Yes.
that. I wanted
Yes.
to go back now. I remember what I wanted to say, or just that you were saying that, oh, the whole system, right? Our,
Mhm.
least in North America, just the workaholic culture and the hierarchy, and you're just expected to be a machine and produce, produce, produce. And yeah, it's really just when you become self-employed or you do something different than the norm, you're really just taking up the space. You're like, as your cat, just like, hey, this is my voice. I haven't heard him, by the way. I don't think
Okay.
his voice carries on to here, but it's just like, yeah, we're really we're confident now in ourselves, or we know that we have a say. We're not just here to be crushed or bend over backwards for this system. And
Mhm.
yeah, I just think that's really, and then allowing, I wish our system allowed rest. Imagine if they normalized the 3-day work week, like what would
Mhm.
happen, right? Because I think truly when people are allowed to rest and play and engage in their creativity and have just holistic balance in their life, then they actually do, they are more productive, they do better
Mhm.
work. It truly is. It's just mind-boggling how the system just hasn't caught up yet. They're just like, no, you need to work your 40 hours or your 50 hours or your 80 hours, and then
Mm,
yeah, just have
mm,
no compassion for just our
yeah,
natural who we are and like our cycles. It's not just women who have energy cycles. I heard men have them too. And it's
right.
just, yeah, it's, we can't be the same, churning along at the same
Yes,
speed or that
yes,
optimal productivity all the time.
yes. And that system is literally man-made as well, right?
It
Like this
is.
is
Yeah.
centuries old. It's no, we all think that we think because we've been living in it so long and designed it for ourselves, like, but this is how it has to be. But
Mm-mm.
actually, it isn't. If we made this, we can unmake it and we can make something different. But so far, we haven't made something different. So honestly, Tony, I think what you're doing when you're working with this podcast is trying to build something different, a different way of thinking, a different way of being, and that's what I'm trying to do too. But we're swimming upstream, and so it's also. I think I'm thankful with acceptance or on the journey of acceptance helps us to do this countercultural work
Hmm.
because we are not going to be accepted, right? We are going against culture, and the
Yes.
majority culture will still be like, "Why are you doing that? That makes no sense.
Hmm.
It's not right." Even some people might say, and
Hmm.
so it takes a lot of self acceptance and self belief to be like, I respect that you have a different opinion, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong or I'm crazy for going on my path, and I'm going to do it anyway because it's important to me and I believe in it.
Hmm.
Yeah, like the learning that other people didn't believe in the same things I did or didn't accept the things that I needed them to accept about me. It was awful. Like it's painful. It's still painful. But in its own way, it's like, yeah, I don't think if that hadn't happened to me, I couldn't go on the path that I am now. Like learning that, oh, some people in life won't accept me and it hurts, but I'll survive that. And actually, I will find other people who do really accept me. The more that I am displaying what my true beliefs and values and who I am is, then people will fall away and new people will come into my circle.
Hmm.
So it's also then giving yourself permission to let go of the things that don't fit into your life anymore and to welcome in the things that do.
Absolutely. And that's the only way we can get true belonging too. Because imagine if you just had to hide yourself or put on a mask
Right.
or try to twist yourself to fit in into your existing group or something just to belong. And you just don't feel good about that. You're just always not like watching your back, but just always kind of on edge and you just are so worried about every little thing. Whereas
For
if you can just
sure.
be yourself and yeah, as you said, display it, just fully express who you are. Like there's people, there's someone for everyone. There's tons of people for everyone. I truly believe that. And same as you said, that some people will just never be happy with whatever you do. But yeah, like you can't please everyone. I think when I realized that, it just definitely was liberating. It's like, oh, okay, I can't please anyone anyway. So what's the point of
Yeah.
still trying to
Yeah.
monitor and change? Like it's important to please yourself, of course. And then it's like, yeah, you will please naturally please some people out there, and then you find
Yeah.
your tribe, and then you're
Yes.
good. So
Yes.
you don't need to
Yeah.
cater to the entire world, and it's impossible to. It's a losing impossible
Yeah.
mission if you try to do that.
There's what is it 8 billion people now the world's population is up to?
Yeah.
So even just statistically, I would think at least 4 billion of them don't like you, right? Don't like
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And that means 4 billion of them probably do, like just statistically. Or even if only 1,000 people really liked me out of 8 billion.
Yeah.
How many, those are that's more relationships than I can maintain anyway,
I
right? So
know. That's
yeah. Yeah, I think it's another part of the fallacy that socially we're brought up with to like, "Oh, you must make everyone like you." Right?
mhm.
That is the norm, or that is how you and if you don't, if there's more people who dislike you or more than one person who dislikes you, you've done something wrong. And
Right,
it's actually
especially for
totally
women.
untrue.
Yeah.
Especially for women,
Yeah.
right? Who are supposed to be nice and caring and who doesn't like a soft, caring person?
Mhm.
Yeah, no, there's becoming an entrepreneur opened up a lot of other individual people's opinions that I wasn't exposed to in a corporate setting where everything kind of gets amalgamated.
Mhm.
So it's like, oh, there's a heck of a lot more people who disagree with me than I ever thought. And that's actually the norm, not the other
Mhm.
way around.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's okay. Yeah, especially with this. Right. I read this book recently on imposter syndrome in women, And yeah, then they were just saying that yes, it's like it's women can't win because if you're likable, you're less respected or seen as less
Mm.
capable a lot of the time. So
Mm.
it's just like like that sucks that we're giving men permission to do whatever and
Mm-hmm.
be whoever, be very aggressive in
Mm-hmm.
the career pursuit, and then when women do that, it's like, oh no, it makes her less likable. I think
Mm-hmm.
they were saying for men it makes them more likable because it's like, oh,
Right.
look how gung-ho they are
Right.
about that. So it's like, oh, so difficult for women especially. It's like, oh, well, if it's a catch-22 anyway, then you may as well do
Yes.
something that, I mean, or maybe try to like value being respected over being liked. I'm not sure. I'm navigating that too as a recovering people pleaser. It's like,
Right.
um,
Yes.
I'm just downplaying myself. I mean, even when I forget I'm a doctor sometimes. So when you had said like, oh, right, like a doctor say the human by brain thing, I was like, no. It's like it's not a hierarchy. It's nothing.
Mm.
It's like I don't know better. I'm not an expert. It's just like my default reaction
Mm.
with that. And so that was just really fascinating to realize in myself when you said that.
That's Thank you for that also points out how I and many people stereotype, right? It's like, oh, you're a doctor, you must know about this. The number of times people are like, oh, you're an accountant, you must love numbers. I'm like, I hate numbers actually, and I suck at math.
Yeah.
It's yeah. So it's like, yes, another excellent demonstration of unconscious bias, perhaps, or the way we shouldn't pigeonhole anybody, no matter
hmm
what.
Yeah, absolutely. And when going back to when you said like, oh, we don't have the energy for that many friends, I mean, that is so true too. It's like we can have a wider network. It is good to know of people and support each other, but it's like, yeah, how much capacity does you only have so much time in a day and energy in a day? And if you
Yes.
just even have some people only need one, like just one good friend, person who really sees you and supports you and loves you and unconditionally accepts you. And I think for many people, it is the romantic partner, but doesn't necessarily need to be. You can have a best friend, you can have a sibling, you can have a parent, well, as long as you're both still alive. But it's like,
Mm-hmm.
just having that one person can make all the difference between feeling alone and isolated and just so unsure of yourself to being like, wow, I belong somewhere. I
Yeah.
belong. Someone cares about me. Yeah. Or just even you have yourself always too. You care about yourself, and I know that's harder to really grasp, but it's
Yeah.
yeah. I yes, just again wanted to say, I guess the one of my missions too is just saying like, yeah, it's like it's everything's okay. It truly like, why did we make these rules of right or wrong? I mean, it was only after the Industrial Revolution that we were like, okay, making this 40-hour work week. And
Yeah.
I don't know when home ownership became such a big thing, but it's just like,
Right.
oh no, you have to own a home. Otherwise, you're an irresponsible person or you're not a real adult. And just all these things. Like,
Mhm.
why did we put all these dumb
Yes.
rules and boxes into how we live life? So for me, it's just truly like, yeah, let's live and let live. Like, it's all
Yes.
good, peace and harmony, forever kumbaya to
Yes.
everyone.
Well,
Yeah.
and we're sort of saying it lightheartedly, but it's totally true. Like I see that that's the real imposter of imposter syndrome, right? This false idol, this thing that's been put out there, like the Wizard of Oz, right? That's like, oh, if we're only like this, right? If only we had our own home, if only we
Mhm.
made a certain amount of money, and if only we dressed this way or behaved this way or had these characteristics, that's the gold standard. And
Mhm.
anything less than that, or if I somehow get put into that position and I'm not all those things, well,
Mhm.
then I got here as an imposter. And
Mhm.
when you pull back the curtain and you see like the little Wizard of Oz man, for anyone who knows that story, right? Who pretends to be this great mask or these powerful things, but underneath it all is just that's the real pretender. And
Mhm.
then it's like, oh, all those things that this little imposter made me believe was true, that I had to do these things, or that that's what real success looked like. That's what
Mhm.
real power looks like. That's what real happiness looks like. I get to decide that for myself. No one gets to say, this is what it is,
Mhm.
and mine must look like that. It's only you can say what makes you truly satisfied and fulfilled and happy in your life.
Mhm. Absolutely, yes. And nobody, yeah, nobody can say that because nobody is you. No one can feel what you feel and
Mhm.
experience your daily life
Mhm.
of the choices that you make and all that. Yeah, and
Mhm.
it's true. I think everyone, no matter how great their life looks, it's some of it is the illusion because you're not seeing the whole
Yeah.
story. Everyone struggles. Just as I said, everyone has flaws and dark parts. Everyone
Yeah.
has negative emotions too from time to
Yeah.
time. Even the most successful, quote unquote, people just still experience self-doubt sometimes, self-confidence, bad days, anger,
Hmm.
sadness, all the frustration, all of
All the
these
things.
things, no matter how much you
Yeah.
have. So it's because it's so okay if it's not so much dependent on the external stuff, then if it really is here in our attitudes and how we feel about ourselves, then yeah, we can accept ourselves today. We can just start
Hmm.
living a happier, more peaceful life in
Hmm.
some way today
Hmm.
and recognizing that. So yeah, I just hope
Hmm.
whoever's listening to the podcast, like this
Hmm.
could just help you, yeah, just think about things in a different way. And then also just, yeah,
Yeah.
we all have such amazing things about us to celebrate all the time. It's like, I feel like,
Yeah.
I mean, in an ideal world, right, that we're all like, yeah, shouting from the rooftops, like, yeah, I'm an awesome person. Here's all the things. Because we all have a
Yes.
personality. Like, and we're so
Yes.
unique, and no one has like our exact set of everything, our traits, our interests, our passions, our
Yes.
skills.
Yes.
Yeah, just our quirky stuff. Yeah, it's like so great. We're all just this mini
Yes.
snowflake or however. But
Yes.
yeah, no, we
Yeah.
don't need to keep adding more and more things. It's like, let's focus on the 99% that we already have
Mm.
that no one can take away from us. And it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, we can add extra things like as we go.
Yes.
There's a nice bonus or cherry, but like, yeah, our
Right.
worth, I don't want it to attach
Yeah.
to those
Yes.
things because we got it all already. I mean, we got the
Yeah.
99.9% already.
And I think like that is an excellent explanation of one of like my key takeaways that I try to give my clients, or as kind of part of my mantra, which is to do less and to be more. Because so many people come to a career coach or leadership coach like, tell me what to do in order to get this, be that, achieve whatever. And it's like, what if you already have everything that you need to
Hmm.
be whatever you want to be? And it's not about adding more. Because, and also who has time, right? Like the
Right.
clients I talk to, they're like, yes, one of the reasons they may not get a coach is because they can't fit it into their schedule. And I totally get that.
Hmm.
But what if we didn't have to add things to our schedules in order to whatever, like fill in the blank for them. And
Hmm.
it's really like, well, you're a cartoonist, Tony. Well, what if it was really going more like embracing that, right? Being more present or spending more time with your art. And that was actually what made you fuller as a person. And who knows, like the impacts of that aren't just that you are a great artist. When you yourself are feeling fulfilled and like you're living your best life or achieving what you really matters to you,
Hmm.
it affects your relationships. It affects other parts of your life where you need to achieve, all that sort of stuff, right? It's no one gets to tell you what's good about you or how good you are. You don't
Hmm.
necessarily have to do more just to be more. You can do less and be more.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, be more, do less. Yeah, I hate that it's as you said, it's the capitalist society that's saying, oh, to be a successful cartoonist, I need to produce work that makes a certain amount of money that I can live on. It's like, no, it's yeah, like I think it's I can't just keep all the ideas in my head. Although I guess I could. I could just enjoy it just for me. Like talk to other creatives and artists, they're just like, yeah, I don't do it for anyone else, I just do it for me. And then it's just your own self-expression, and it goes out there, and it could benefit someone, like you don't know, but that's
Mhm.
not why you create it. I guess I think once we get to a place of celebrating ourselves, accepting ourselves, and yeah, just really feeling at peace with our gifts, then we just naturally do whatever, like we express it without so much drama, and like knowing that it's safe to do whatever, that we don't have to force ourselves to spend some time working towards this thing or this goal in that certain way. It's just like, this is play. Imagine if life was just about felt like play all the time. You just like loved the things that you were doing, and those gifts like do benefit the world too and contribute,
Yes.
and then you do get enough compensation for it to so you can
Yes.
live and meet your basic needs, right? Like I think that would be
Yes.
ideal. And yeah, sadly, I'm sad that capitalism has
Yeah.
infiltrated at least
Yes.
a lot of places. But I mean, some places I wanted to share, since we were on this topic, just that I was in Thailand for the past year and a half, and there was a community I found that was totally just not completely removed from the capitalist system, but it had just a great system where it was just like, hey, here's a place. It's an orphanage for people of all ages. There were children there, there were adults there. Some people have lived there for years. There's some guy from Russia who's there for a few years, and you have your gifts and you share them with the community, and you all help out to maintain things, and you just don't have to worry about making enough money to meet your basic needs because they provided that. It was a meditation temple. You just had to go to the class for an hour each day and practice it in your own life. You can come and go too. You didn't have to live there, but if you needed a place to live permanently, they gave you a private room there. And that's what I'm trying to work on. If there's a way to build this for people all over the world, or at least one in each continent, so that you can come, you can cultivate your craft, you can figure out what truly is important to you without needing to worry about feeding yourself. It's just a place where you can really tap into yourself, and then when you're ready you can go back out there, or not. We keep expanding, we can figure out a way, because they get, I don't know how they do it, but they do manage getting food somewhere. I think it's monks and people donating to the monks, but just in some way, if we can figure that out, I think, like, yeah, who needs to live in a capitalist society? We could live in this
Yes.
back in the days when we just helped each other out, not necessarily a barter system, but just, yeah,
Right.
where we
Yeah.
focused a lot more on the relationships and the connections and self-expression or
Yes.
creativity, or I don't know, maybe this is too
Yes.
idealistic, but I saw a system that actually worked. So I think that's so cool. It's replicatable, I think.
Yes. So my takeaway is that I need to move to Thailand and find this
Maybe
place. I
you're all
think.
welcome to. Or once I set
I.
them up, some
Hmm.
people in my community and exceptions community and I are trying to set some up, at least in Japan
It's
and
cool.
Thailand. So, and then maybe
That's
more.
very cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah. No, I love that. But something I'm taking from that is just the redefining community, or building a community in the 21st century that we haven't had so far in the 21st century.
Hmm.
Yeah, I like that vision.
Yeah, in some ways, or just challenging the system, trying to live differently. And yeah, you
Mm,
made such a great point too, that it requires extra levels of self-acceptance to
mm,
keep going with this.
mhm, mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
it's all a journey, right?
It
So
is.
I know we went over time, but this was just such a great conversation, Rosie. So thank you
Me
again. I
too.
always end with just asking, like, what were
Mhm,
biggest pieces of advice you'd say to your younger self or to the
mm,
audience?
mm,
Anything else you'd like to share, and how people can
mm,
connect with you and work with you or get in
mhm,
touch with you?
mm. Yeah, I don't. I your point about the journey. I don't regret anything that happened to me in my like over my lifetime, even though some of those things were very painful. Because I my personal belief system is just that everything happened for a reason, and everything that happened to me led to the place I am today. Like, I wouldn't have be having this conversation with you, Tony, if everything in my life hadn't happened exactly the way it was.
True.
That being said, what I do wish I had received earlier was more self acceptance, and also acceptance from other people. I absolutely recognize that not only is self acceptance hard, but how do we learn self acceptance if we've never gotten acceptance from other people? Like, who
Hmm.
teaches us about acceptance, right?
Hmm.
So, maybe something that I'd love for your listeners to receive, or to seek out if they don't have that already, is individual people or communities or groups where they can feel acceptance. Maybe it's even a group agreement of, hey, we're here to do nothing but just listen empathetically to each other and accept each other for who we are, because we don't have that in other places. Like, maybe there's some very intentional group. And if nothing else, because it's also a very isolating time for people in North America, particularly just the way our nuclear families and our social structures are.
Hmm.
I've genuinely had to practice giving compassion to myself when I can't seem to get it from anybody else. And so it's also to try and access that in different ways. I actually have a free resource if people want to get it. It's just a 3-day email series, but it's trying to go beyond the, oh, practice self-compassion, practice self-care. I get how hard it is to actually do that. And so through my trauma-informed learning, I've given some tips on, if you can't just be nice to yourself, like, you can't just be like, oh, Rosie, you're fantastic. You're an amazing person. And then believe that. There are things that we can do to access different parts, different neural pathways in our brain, or start rebuilding those neural pathways, especially if we've never learned to talk to ourselves that way or haven't received messages like that. We can do breathing exercises, we can do physical touch exercises, and those are all primers to get to a place where we can actually say things to ourselves like, I don't deserve to be treated that way, or I deserve love. I shouldn't be shamed all the time, and start to believe them and bring them into our lives. So I'm happy to. It's on my website, which is changinglenses.ca, and they can find that under the resources tab of my changinglenses.ca website.
Awesome. Sign me up. Oh my gosh. I'd love because just the straight up mirror exercise, telling yourself these affirmations. I'm just like, some days I'm like, yeah, right. I can't believe this. So it sounds like
Right.
you're teaching an unconventional way to get there, or maybe a more roundabout, non that's not so confronting to get you, as you said, prime you, like build you up to
Yeah.
being able where that works. Yes, I'll include the links in the show notes. Thank you
Okay.
for sharing.
Cool.
Were there other resources or people you recommend other than Dr. Mate that
Yes.
you think were the most helpful for you, especially in your extensive study of trauma and everything that you have any top
Yes.
three or just a couple
Aha.
recs?
I actually, Dr. Mate probably is my top three. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. First I have to note that these are both white presenting men, and that's just a fact of how research and science has worked so far. Is like that's typically who's been writing this, but I vetted them as in I've read them through my lens as an Asian Canadian woman. And I particularly look for resources that are socially justice minded and or see beyond just the author's own lens of being whatever their identity is. So on my website, I also have a list of trauma resources that I started curating, which includes Dr. Mate's books. Bessel van der Kolk's book is called The Body Keeps the Score, which is similar in theme
Love
to
that.
When the Body Says No, but it gets a little bit more technical on how trauma impacts us and things that it relates to around relationships and the way we behave and stuff like that. It's I think it's quite readable and also very interesting and knowledgeable. So yeah, I encourage you who are listening right now, feel free if you're interested in more trauma resources, please check out my resource list on my website.
Perfect. Oh, thank you so much. Now I'm curious, oh my gosh, because I hadn't thought about vetting these people in through beyond their own lens. What about Pete Walker, who wrote Complex PTSD? What are your thoughts on him?
So I read his book as part of my coach training program. It, I didn't relate to it as much. And it wasn't necessarily because of his identity as a white presenting man. It, I, yeah, I think his focus still was on more the physical abuse in childhood. He acknowledges fully that the emotional abuse can be actually even worse in terms of how it impacts a child. So I get that, but it was still more like a therapeutic lens that he was writing from,
Mm,
versus, for example, Natalie Gutierrez, I think is the author's name, who, oh shoot, the name of the book escapes me, but she's writing more specifically about racialized body trauma, and through the
mm,
lens of people of color. And I like that as well as Resma Menachem. He does that more from an American lens, so like Black Americans or American slavery and the intergeneral impacts of slavery. So
mm.
very, very important, very relevant. So that's why I've tried to look for some variety of things as well. Colonialism and the impacts on Indigenous folks and how that impacts them, but also how therapy has been colonized and how we need to decolonize therapy. And
Yes.
that's a whole other podcast episode we could
Yes,
go
I'd love to
into.
have you back and let's talk about that in another
Mm-hmm,
episode.
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Thank you so
Yes.
much
Oh, The Pain
again.
We Carry. Sorry. The Pain We Carry by Natalie Gutierrez. Yeah, that's the
Mm.
book.
Oh, yeah, that's on my list. Okay, that'll be next.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much again for sharing your wisdom and your experiences. Is there any other final words you want to say before we close out the episode?
Oh, I think just that for you, the people listening, just kind of speaking directly to you almost and like you matter. I see you, I hear you, you matter, your pain matters, your pain is valid, and you deserve healing. So, yeah, just you deserve it.
Thank you so much. All right, here
You're
concludes
so
the
welcome.
episode. We'll see you next time.